Folks, behind me is a 5-gallon rim tank that I ended up scaping for a male longfin betta fish, and I ended up documenting the entire thing from scaping to cycling to stocking the tank, so we have quite a fun video ahead of us. So if you're a beginner, I think this video might be extremely helpful and hopefully insightful. And yeah, I just want to share my approach to setting up a 5-gallon for a betta fish. So sit back and relax and hopefully enjoy the video. So this is a 5-gallon rim tank that I've been holding on to for actually a really long time now. It's been a minute since I've had anything in it, so I'm really excited to be using it again. And yeah, I just love it. It's a classic look. I feel like all of us as small animal enthusiasts have had a 5-gallon tank that looks like this at some point in our life. And yeah, it's a classic choice. And a lot of people actually in the comments have been asking about scaping a 5-gallon and just kind of keeping it simple, and that's what we're doing right now. Alright, so we have a cleaned out 5-gallon rim tank now. It's been power washed, scraped it with a razor, and yeah, pretty clean. So first things first, we have our nutrient layer, which is some aqua soil inside of a mesh bag, and as you might have noticed, it's actually really dirty looking. So the reason why this mesh bag is so dirty is because it's actually from another project. I recently took apart my grandfather's fish tank. He decided he didn't really want to dabble in the hobby so much anymore, and he just wanted to relax, and water changes were kind of getting hard on him. So we took that apart, and I decided that we were going to use the aqua soil from that tank in here. And since this has been in an established tank for quite some time, this will certainly help jumpstart the nitrogen cycle in here. So yeah, it looks really dirty, but I can assure you it's going to be highly beneficial in here. Oh, hey buddy. So yeah, if you want your hardscape to be a certain height, this really goes a long way, and roots from plants have no issues getting in here. The only downside to really doing this is it's harder to plant stuff at the beginning because you have this mesh bag blocking your tweezers. But other than that, when it comes to actual plant growth, it does just fine. Alright, so here is the hardscape, and honestly, I really like the way it looks. Spiderwood goes a really long way, and honestly, if I were to choose one driftwood to use for the rest of my life, it would probably be spiderwood, because I think it looks really good with rocks and without. Honestly, if you had a tank and you just threw some spiderwood in there, I think it would look super cool, especially when you get to putting epiphytes in all these little tiny holes and whatnot, and mosses on all the branches. I think it just looks super awesome. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Alright, so I really like this hardscape orientation, but this is too close to the glass, so I'm going to go ahead and break off this twig here. Alright, so right here we have some Spectra Stone Premium Aquarium Gravel by the brand Estes. Looks like this. Focus. What the heck? As you can see, it's like a mixed bag. Get some Leica in there for some reason. I'm not sure why, but okay. Yeah, looks pretty good. I'm just gonna go ahead and sprinkle this around just to add the little bit of detail. We also have some UNS Contra San Kona. Let's go ahead and throw some of that in there too. Oh no, I really like it. So what's gonna happen now is I'm gonna go ahead and glue this together, glue the spider wood onto the lava rock, and then I'm gonna go ahead and flood it and see what it looks like. Alright, so we have everything glued down, I think. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to fill this up with dechlorinated tap water, and yeah, hopefully everything kind of stays in place. Because when you do the initial fill up, sometimes the scape kind of does get a little wonky, so hopefully the integrity stays put. Alright, so it's currently the next day. We had this flooded overnight, and as you can see, or as you saw, there are tiny little bubbles all over the place. This is perfectly normal. It's just air escaping from tiny little crevices in the substrate and in all the rocks and the driftwood and such. So I see this question asked a lot from beginners in forums just regarding the small bubbles and whether or not it's okay. And suffice to say, it is perfectly fine. Just let the tank do its thing and let all the air escape, and it'll clear up in no time. And if you're really concerned about it, you can sort of agitate it a little bit, but I just kind of let it do its thing because it's going to go away momentarily. So at the moment, here is what we are working with. I think it looks super promising thus far, and I figured let's get to planting. So this right here is my immersed grow out bin. Now I featured this in the last video that I posted, or maybe 2 videos ago, I don't remember. But a lot of you all were asking, what is that immersed grow out bin thing that you've been using, and how are your plants staying alive out of the water? And yeah, let me explain. Okay, now to be completely honest, this thing is looking absolutely horrendous right now. It's just looking like, I don't even know, it's just looking crazy. In a perfect world, well, let me show you something real quick. As you can see, there is some aqua soil down here, and basically in a perfect world you would have a bunch of these, and perhaps maybe you'd have a bin with just Anubias, a bin with just S. repens, and a bin with just hairgrass or whatever. And that's essentially what I used to do. This used to be an S. repens grow out bin, and as you can see right now it's just a cluster of different plants. I've been tearing a lot of projects down and kind of moving things all over, and this was sort of a last-ditch effort to kind of just preserve all the plants that I had. Basically, the bottom line is when you have these aquatic plants in a bin with a lid on it and everything is nice and damp, they essentially can live and thrive in an environment like this. And I use this fertilizer spray. This is Wabikusa mist. To the matter of fact, is actually a lot of the plants that we see in the aquarium hobby don't actually live underwater most of the time in the wild, and a lot of them actually live in the riparian zone where they frequently get splashed, or perhaps they live in a rainforest where it's incredibly humid all the time. In reality, a lot of the plants that we use actually aren't even aquatic plants necessarily. They're just sustainable in aquatic environments. And that's not to say that there aren't plants that are not fully aquatic, because there are. Plants such as like Valsenaria, they require to be fully submerged at all times or else they'll die. So there you have it. Alright, so here's some stuff that I went ahead and pulled out, and as you can see, these were actually in there as well. These are pieces of dragonstone with the Nubius inside, and yeah, I just kind of had these in there like that, with the lid on, of course, and they've just been chilling. So I went ahead and pulled out some plants that I want to use for this project. We have some dwarf Sagittaria, and then lots of micro sword that I've been holding on to for quite some time. So yeah, I want to plant these in the little corners in the tank, and then we have lots of Anubias nana and nana petite as well. So let's see if we can find a spot for these. Oh, we also have a crypt plant that I found. So yeah, super excited to use these. Here is a piece of driftwood with rabbit's foot fern growing on it, and as you can see, there's just a mushroom chilling on there. That's pretty crazy. But yeah, we'll just go ahead and put that back in there. Alright, so first things first, we're going to start with the dwarf Sagittaria. I'm going to go ahead and plant it in the back. And my intent is to have the dwarf Sagittaria be the background plant for this tank. Or at least one of them anyway. And there we have it, the dwarf Sagittaria has been planted in the back. I do know it's looking a little sparse, but that's because I just wanted to use up what we had in that bin. But if we end up wanting to use more, I will pull some from some other tanks that I have. So I'm just going to play it by ear, but for now, let's go ahead and plant some of the other stuff that we have. So this right here is Liliopsis brasiliensis, also known as micro sword, and as you can see, it's been sort of shooting out some of these runners here. So it was doing really well in that immersed grow out bin. So yeah, just to show that it works, and yeah, we're going to go ahead and put this in the foreground. It's kind of hard to plant the bits that are like strands of runners, but I'm going to try my best to just kind of bunch it up, and then just, that should be fine. It'll situate itself. The idea with this micro sword is to sort of have a carpeting effect with it. We are doing a low-tech tank here, so I don't expect it to fully carpet the front, but it should be growing in pretty nice and densely at some point in the near future, so that's the idea here. And lastly, when it comes to stem plants, there's one more plant that I want to put in here, and that's this wild card of a plant, and that is crypt. I actually have no idea what kind of crypt it is. That's why it's called a wild card plant. I think it's Crypt Wentii brown. I'm not sure, because crypts always change their color, and it's hard to identify. So yeah, I figured we could go ahead and put this in the corner by a rock and see what happens. Let's go ahead and just put it right here. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. I figured for the Anubias, I'm not really sure. We'll just kind of stick it in here. Yeah, actually, you know what? That doesn't look too bad. I'm still on the fence about this particular variety, though. This is Anubias nana, not nana petite. And as you can see, it does look a little big compared to the other leaves here. This is a smaller tank, so we kind of want to keep that scale, but we'll play this by ear. But for now, I'll go ahead and stick some of this in here. It definitely doesn't look bad, but I might want to use a smaller leaf. I always love planting Anubias nana and spiderwood. It just feels like it was meant to be, because it's so easy to do. You just kind of shove it in these little tiny, like, things here. It just, nature was just intended for this to happen, you know what I mean? So after all that, here's what we ended up with. I'm sure we're going to make some changes, so I'm going to sit on it for a little bit and we'll see what happens. What's up, everyone? It's been about 3 days since the initial fill up. We've been running the hang on the back filter, in the meantime, and things are looking a little bit grimy, and that's because things are now in motion in here as far as this tank being an ecosystem goes. We have biofilm and brown algae diatoms on the wood, which basically means that this tank is now basically an ecosystem. So one thing I should note is the plants in here are kind of wilting and melting a little bit, and that is simply because they are adjusting to their new environment. They did come from a vastly different environment. That, you know, some of these plants were in that immersed bin, and some of these were submerged in water in a tank that used RO water. And I did actually do this initial fill up with tap water, so that is worth noting. But so I actually want to drain this halfway because there are more plants that I want to add, and yeah, we're just getting started here. So let's get after it. Alright, so this right here is my little desktop shrimp cube. There's lots of dwarf Sagittaria in here, so we're actually going to steal some from this and go ahead and put it in our new tank. So in addition to the dwarf Sagittaria that we just picked, we also have some microsaurid here as well. I picked this up from the Reef Aquarium shop here in Indianapolis. And yeah, these are all plants that we already have in that aquarium. I just want to make it look more dense straight away. So these should be a great addition, so let's go ahead and plant them. Alright, so we are here at our 20-gallon long green neon tetra slash Endler's Live Bearers ecosystem tank, and in here we have some Anubias Nana Petite, which I would like to use in the 5-gallon that we are currently scaping. As you saw, we put some Anubias Nana in the 5-gallon, which is slightly bigger than the Petite variety, and I think the Petite variant will look better. It has a smaller leaf size, and I think that'll preserve that sense of scale that we have going on. It is a smaller tank, and I think it'll just make it look better. It'll be more proportionate to what we already have in there. So yeah, let's go ahead and steal some Nana Petite from here. So this right here is a really beautiful piece that just keeps on giving. It is a piece of Anubias Nana Petite that is attached to a nice river rock, and it is quadrupled in size since the time that I made this. It was just a tiny piece of Anubias Nana Petite that was like glued onto a rock, maybe this big or so, and it's just turned into this, and it's truly stunning. So yeah, it's quadrupled in size, and it's the gift that keeps on giving. So we're gonna go ahead and cut some pieces off of this, and I think this will be a lovely addition to our 5-gallon. Alright, so here we have it, some really generous clippings of Anubias Nana Petite. As you can see, these leaves are much smaller than what we have in that 5-gallon at the moment, and I think this is going to look really nice. Alright, so we're pretty much done planting the baseline of plants that I want to include overall in this tank. I'm sure we'll add more later at some point, But there's one more main plant that I want to add, and this is a bit of an experimental one because I'm not entirely sure if it'll work. So this right here is Hygrophila pinnatifida, and it's a plant that I normally see in really high-tech jungle-style tanks. I see them a lot in like ADA jungle-style tanks. This is a really popular plant that is used in Japan amongst the ADA community, and I'm not entirely sure if this will work in a low-tech environment, but what would this hobby be without a little bit of experimentation? So yeah, this will be another wild card plant that I would like to include, and hopefully it does well. So these are shaped incredibly odd, and that's because they are normally they have stalks or like these tall stems, but in this case they were jammed inside of a tissue culture cup, and yeah, they grew kind of weird, but they should adapt to their environment when we put them in the tank. Also, for the heck of it, let's go ahead and put some Hygrophila in the shrimp generator. So with all that said and done, the hard part was finally over. Now it's just time to sit back and relax and ultimately just see what happens and pray that everything works out to the best. Well, everyone, it has been roughly 30 days. Actually, it's been way more than that since we initially filled this up with water, and the ecosystem has started the process. And it's been so long that I actually built up the courage to get a haircut. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. As you can see, there is brown algae everywhere. This is currently in the brown algae diatom phase, and do not worry, this is perfectly acceptable. This is perfectly normal for a new tank, and it is a perfectly healthy step in the process of setting up a new aquarium. And you might have noticed the brown algae is very gelatinous looking, like it's kind of flowing with the flow of the water. And that is simply because it's brown algae, and we also have brown algae diatoms latched onto biofilm, which is causing that jello-y effect with the brown algae, and that's why it's kind of floating all over the place. Spiderwood is absolutely notorious for spawning biofilm when you're getting things underway in a brand new tank like this. And that's not to mention we have nothing in here currently eating the algae or the biofilm, and the shrimp are going to be a wonderful proponent to that. They're going to really chew down on all of this biofilm and grossness going on, but yeah, as of right now we have nothing competing with the algae. There's nothing eating it, and it's just growing like crazy. So we have actually seen some growth with the plants in here, which is really cool. The microsword, also known as the Liliopsis brasiliensis, is actually sending runners, which is actually pretty remarkable, because this light, honestly, being this high up, is not that strong at all, and the Hygrophila also has been growing surprisingly, and I'm pretty shocked about that. Granted, we are not preserving that red color of the pinnatifida in here because, again, this light is not very strong. Actually, it is a pretty decently powerful light, but it is really far up, and yeah, there's no CO2 in here, so the Hygrophila is actually growing, but it is growing green rather than red or pinkish, if you will. So other than that, I mean, honestly, it is growing. There are lots of runners with the dwarf Sagittaria, but I do want to add some more plants in here. So I went ahead to my local fish store and I picked up some Wentii plants here. We have green Wentii, and then we also have red Wentii, and the red Wentii actually looks the same as the green Wentii, and I think it will in this particular build, again, because of the low lighting. You need a lot of highlighting to really make those reds pop, but anyway, I digress. And then we also have some dwarf Sagittaria as well. The amount that we had in there simply wasn't cutting it, and I want to get this background just growing in a little quicker. Here we are, the Endler ecosystem tank. Just take a look at this crypt Wenti brown just growing out of the top like it's nobody's business. It's all waxy and stuff. That's cool. Completely doing okay out of the water. That's awesome. Yeah, this has become a jungle within the last month. I don't know where this growth came from. I mean, this tank has always been a jungle, but it has been growing like crazy as of lately. Insane. So I'm actually really surprised that these are doing as good as they are, because they were in here for a long time. So this is Wenti green, and look how much we got. Oh yeah, that's a beautiful looking plant. I think this is gonna look really nice in there. I know, yeah, lately I've been using a lot of crypt plants. I've been going through a crypt phase, if you will. And here we have it. This is red Wenti, which looks a lot like crypt Wenti brown, or Wenti brown. Sometimes the two get mixed up and missold, I've seen, but yeah, but whatever. So one of the biggest methods that I use, and this is not my method, this is, common knowledge generally, but I use medium to low light to create that jungle effect. The thing is when you use medium to low light, the absence of light, depending on the plant, mind you, is going to cause the plant to want to grow to the top in order to get that light that it needs to suffice for its life, right? So plants such as Sagittaria, Crypts, Hygrophila, Limnophila. Now, obviously, not all plants are like this. It's a bit more complicated than that, but generally speaking, when we're talking low tech, I do prefer medium to low light simply because, yeah, it causes plants to grow a little higher. And you can take this tank, for example, the Endler Library Ecosystem Tank. I run the light at full intensity, but the top is completely covered in floaters, and because of the absence of light, the Sagittaria in here and the Crypts are just growing, just straight up towards the top. So, yeah, do with what you will with that information. It's not necessarily an answer, not necessarily the right way to do things. It's just certain type of plants like certain types of lighting configurations. Well, everyone, it's time to get to planting, and honestly, I have no specific strategy or placement other than that I want to cover the back to create a nice, luscious background. So the additional background plants are in now, the Sagittaria and the Wenti green and Wenti red, and yeah, it's not at its full potential yet, and it's gonna grow in, and it's gonna look super awesome, I can almost assure you. And yeah, what's gonna happen now is we need to add some shrimp in here to take care of this biofilm and brown algae mess. So let's go get some shrimp. Almost immediately, the cherry shrimp were swimming pretty much all over the place and gnawing on pretty much everything they could get their hands on, which was a pretty good sign. Well, it has been roughly 1 week since we have added the shrimp in here, and boy, did the shrimp deliver. They have cleared up all the brown algae for the most part. There's still a lot in here, but it is a far cry from what it was last week. It was looking super grimy and disgusting, and it's actually looking really cleared up in here. So, and in addition to just all of the food that's being provided from the biofilm and whatnot, we have some plant melt that is also feeding a lot of the microorganisms in here. So we're seeing a lot of microfauna in here as well, just swimming around, lots of cyclops and detritus worms and whatnot, and those are going to be a great snack for the betta fish that we put in here. So super excited about that. As many of you may know, betta fish are prone to jumping out of tanks, and as you can see, there's no lid here, so we need to make one, but we have some challenges. As you can see, this piece of driftwood here is sticking out of the water, and I don't really want to remove it. I like the way it looks, so we need to find a workaround. Alright, so here is the final product. As you can see, it's got the screen on it, and we can just kind of set it on top. And there's a little notch on the top to account for the driftwood that's sticking out of the water. Now we just got to do this for the remaining pieces, and we're good to go. This lid isn't perfect, and I plan on revising it at some point soon. One other factor I want to consider going forward is the fact that this black window screen mesh that I use for this lid does actually stop down light quite a bit, and they actually do use it on film sets to stop down tungsten lighting to get a more dim lighting effect. So it's doing that here too. So I will be keeping an eye on that, and hopefully it doesn't affect plant growth too much. These are relatively easy growing plants, so hopefully it's not an issue, but I will definitely be taking that into consideration. Well everyone, it has now been 2 weeks and we ended up stocking this tank with a male longfin betta fish, and he's super beautiful. And this particular fish is called a mustard gas betta fish, which is a crazy name in my opinion. My great-great-grandfather is rolling around in his grave. He was a World War I veteran, and if I told him that I had a fish called a mustard gas fish, I mean, he'd probably be like, what the heck? So a few things that I want to note. We're still using the same hang on the back filter that I have been using this whole time. This time around, it's stuffed with filter media on the back, and as you can see, it's sort of slowing down the flow a little bit, which makes it perfect for this particular environment. Betta fish like really slow moving water, so it works out perfectly. And in addition to that, we also have a peace lily growing out at the top of the hang on the back filter, which has been doing fairly well actually. It's been growing a lot actually, so that's pretty cool. That's a welcome surprise. So with the combination of the filter media and the peace lily growing in the hang on the back filter and sucking up nitrates, we have like essentially a supercharged hang on the back filter. So it's definitely packing a lot of punch for its size here, and it's contributing greatly to the overall health of this tank. And obviously we are running a heater on here. I'm running the water at roughly 79 to 80 degrees, and heaters are absolutely critical when you have a betta fish, so definitely don't skip out on that. Another thing that I want to mention is the fact that I actually still have the shrimp in here. Now my original intuition was to put the shrimp in here to clean up the brown algae, and I was going to actually remove them, at least the older ones, as many as I could anyway, because betta fish sometimes are not very nice. But I've actually kept them in here, and it has been roughly a week, and it has not been a problem, so that's fairly interesting actually. He seems to have no problem with the shrimp, and the shrimp are going out their business. I'm looking at like 3 or 4 shrimp here in the foreground just straight chilling, so they don't seem to have a problem with the fish. So let me know in the comments down below, do you keep shrimp with betta fish, especially in a smaller tank such as this one, or do you think it's not a good idea? I'm open to criticism, let me know. But for all intents and purposes, the shrimp have been doing really good in here, and they're continuing to clean up all that brown algae. And as far as I can tell, it hasn't affected the bioload too much, and I intend on doing water changes roughly once every 2 weeks or so. Well everyone, I hope you all found this video enjoyable and moreover insightful, and especially if you're a beginner who's looking to get into the world of betta fish, I hope this video was somewhat of a help and somewhat of an inspiration. It's really not that hard. A lot of it is just patience and just waiting for it to become an ecosystem. And yeah, honestly, so if you're someone who has a betta fish currently in a plastic container, do this. Do this. 5-gallon minimum tank with a filter and a heater, and your fish will thank you for the rest of its life. I can almost guarantee it.